Today we're going to do something different. Now that all the region packs have dropped, I've been inspired to revisit parts of Magnolia County and bring them up to current standards. And what better place to start than Bailey? We originally built Bailey back in episode 15, almost exactly a year ago. The town was designed as an industry hub, supporting the shale oil fields discovered by University of Superior geologists at the base of this mountain. We laid out everything that the industry in the town needed, but let's be honest, it wasn't the best looking place. And it makes sense if you think about it. The game had just launched, Paradox mods didn't even exist yet, and we were limited to base game assets. Plus, I was still learning how to play the game. Over time though, we've made incremental improvements as new tools and assets became available. And now, it's time for our next big iteration. But this time though, we're not just making tweaks. We're going back to the drawing board, reimagining every building and every layout now that we have region and content creator packs to work with. Right now, Bailey feels too dense, too disjointed, and not quite in the spirit of what I had originally envisioned. And that changes today. So grab your sledgehammer, sit back, and let's get to work. And if you're excited to revisit areas we haven't touched in a while, hit the like button. And if you're skeptical but here for the ride, hit the like button for that too, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Or just leave an emoji representing Bailey for the sake of engagement. And without further ado, let's jump right in. I want to begin by cleaning things up a bit. And by a bit, I mean I want to eliminate Bailey. Save for a couple of things. I want to make sure that we are saving these two parks right here, this triangle park, and the overall roadway layout. And that's because I want Bailey to feel the same even if we replace every single asset. So to that end, I'm going to delete all the buildings, and I'll also delete all of the paths through here while saving the local roads. So the first thing we have to do is de-zone, and I'm only going to do a portion of the city right now so that I don't lose track of the way things were before. And I'll basically do everything from here to the highway right here. I'm going to change the zoning of this area before I delete the buildings, so I'm not going to worry about this area just yet. And now I'll delete everything. I want to take just a moment before I eliminate all the landscaping to show you what I did with the landscaping. Now, this build obviously occurred at a very specific point in City Skylines 2's history where we had just gotten the line tool on the Thunderstore, and as a result, I was using it all over the place, probably to an unhealthy extent. So that's why it looks like this, and I can't wait to fix it. Now, I do have to point out one thing though. There is a cavalcade of homeless people walking towards the bus stop, and that's going to lead to all sorts of problems. So I'm going to use Bye Bye Homeless to Thanos snap them out of the build, and we'll remove the stuck homeless and then remove all the rest. And with that, our streets are completely clear of homeless people, at least for the time being. And to preserve a vestige of what used to be here, I decided to leave this. It's really strange looking, but we're gonna try to make it look better. So stay tuned for that. But now it's time to figure out our roadway layout. And I really wanna think about roadway hierarchy. So obviously the Iron Mountain Highway is an arterial. It is a road that prioritizes mobility, not accessibility. And then it turns into Turtle Street, which we're gonna fix that. Main Street. So Main Street is also the arterial, and Bailey Street right here is a collector, prioritizing moving people from neighborhood to neighborhood and from their neighborhood to the arterial. And then all of the other alleyways right here, those are all local roads. And bluntly, I want to change all of them. So for Main Street, we've got these absolutely excellent parking roads now, and I'm going to use the 2-lane angled parking road to clean things up here. Now, there are more things I want to do to this road, but that's going to come a little bit later on. Next, I want to focus on Bailey Street. And for this one, we're going to use Road Builder. Now that we have that at our disposal, I think that it's imperative that we use it. Now, one thing to notice here is that we have this false choice in City Skylines 2. Do you want parking or do you want trees? I don't like that. And that's why we're using Road Builder. I want this road to be a collector, but I want it to have parking on one side. So I'm going to modify this and call it Bailey Collector. And there are a couple of changes I want to make. First of all, I want to always have trees and landscaping on the outside. And then second of all, I want to add one-sided parking. I'm going to also see if I can narrow up the sidewalks, and I can't. The moment that I do that, all of the landscaping and the trees go away. So we'll just maintain that wider width. And now that we have this configured, I'm going to run it all the way up and down this road. But I want to point out one thing first. You might have noticed that the road wear is missing, and that is because I've made one change to the mod set. Actually, I made a couple of changes. but this is the first one. I've added the road wear adjuster mod. And what this allows you to do is change the brightness of the road wear. So I've turned it all the way down as low as I can get it. Actually, I guess it could go a little bit lower. Almost as low as I can get it. And what that has done is basically made the road wear go away. And now the opacity changes the dark area, and you can see it as a result of the way that we've modified this. It looks like rather than there being white road wear, there's black road wear, which to me is how you'd expect this road to look. So I think that that's much better, and it makes it easy to see where the road lanes are and where the parking is because it's a little bit lighter, which to me makes a ton more sense. Editor Phil here, and I realized that I forgot to point out the rest of the mods that I've added to the build. The first is Advanced Road Tools, and this is basically a replacement for the Zoning Toolkit mod that hasn't been working. So this basically allows you to turn zoning on and off on a road. With every update, it seems to be a little bit better. So we're going to be using this one extensively today. Next is Zone Organizer, and this is a really simple one. All it does is take the vanilla residential zoning categories and break them up into multiple tabs. Makes it a lot easier to find the specific category that you're looking for, particularly with all the region packs installed now. I've also added an Asset UI Manager, and this is an amazing mod that fixes the rest of the UI. So you can see that it moves all of the parking roads into a tab, all the bridges into a tab, all the pathways to the road tab, and consolidates all of them. It does this throughout the entire UI, and it's a excellent mod. I'd highly recommend it to basically everybody. Does the same thing with schools, separates elementary, high schools, colleges, and universities in their own tabs. This is the way that the game should be designed. I'm also adding vanilla asphalt, specifically because I want to be able to do this right here so that we can cover up the sidewalk with asphalt and make it seem like the asphalt is extending over the sidewalk. And finally, I'm also adding vanilla curb. And the main reason for this is I want to use the area bucket, and to use the area bucket, I have to have some sort of Netlane to fill within, and the vanilla curb is going to help out with that a ton. So I'm going to drag this all the way up and down here. And the nice thing about the way that we've designed the roads is that I never have to worry about adding trees to the side. They always just show up right here for us. Now, I don't love the side of the road that got the parking. It's going to be the side with the homes. I kind of want to have it to be the side with the water. So we'll just reverse this. And there we go. And I like that it's a bit wider, but not quite as wide as the arterial because it makes it feel like it's a different roadway classification. Now, for all the local roads, I'm going to modify the alleyway and add attached parking. So first we'll rename this Bailey Local Road. And then I'm going to replace the shoulders with sidewalks. And now, bluntly, these sidewalks are way too wide. 3.5 meters, if I'm doing my math correctly, is something like 10 feet. And that is just way too wide. Generally, sidewalks in the US on a local road are about 5 feet. So maybe a little under half of this. So I'm going to try to shrink this up. And what I'm looking for here is to make sure that we're not getting jank at this intersection junction. And I think another 0.5 meter might fix it perfectly. Nope, it's not getting better. It's actually getting worse. And I think that 2 meters might be the sweet spot. And that's about 6 feet, which I think is an acceptable width. And now that we've figured this out, I'm going to paste this on every single local road in the community. And there are a couple more small changes I want to make. There is kind of a mess of local roads right here, and though we could preserve that for the sake of history, I don't think that this is the kind of history I want to preserve. So I'm going to get rid of this. And then a couple more notes. Along Main Street, I'm not exactly sure how long I want the commercial corridor to be, so there's a good chance that we narrow up Main Street, even though it will still function as an arterial. And I also think it's worth pointing out that because this road was a different size than the original, there are some janky junctions like this one. I'll probably have to adjust those manually, but we're going to be using another mod to control our zoning that I think is going to make this a ton easier and maybe make some of this stuff not matter quite as much. And with our cleanup complete, let's move on to downtown revitalization. Okay, perhaps calling it revitalization doesn't make a lot of sense, and we've scraped the entire downtown, but it will be revitalized relative to what we had before. Now, I'm going to do something special here. Now, I know that some of you don't like when I plop buildings, but I feel like for special places, we got to do special things. And Main Street is going to be a special place. What I want to do is really micro target the buildings that we're getting so it feels coherent and makes a lot of sense. And I want to put a lot of time into the downtown so that it feels like a real place. But before we can do any of that, I do want to take a look at some of these side streets just to make sure that our zoning is coherent. And that's because right now you can see that the zoning is kind of all over the place. Thankfully, we have a new mod called the Advanced Road Tools, and this is the same as Zoning Toolkit. It just works a little bit better. So for this one, we get these new zoning side options, and it's very easy to use. I'm able to just hover over a road, and let's say I don't want there to be any zoning, for instance, on these side streets, which for now I don't want there to be zoning. All I have to do is select them and the zoning disappears. Next up, I want to make sure that we've got at least 8 units in between our streets. This really comes down to wanting to make sure that the single family homes that we place behind Main Street are really coherent. So for that, I'm going to be using the replace tool. And one thing that we're going to have to be a little bit careful about is because this is a strange size street, we end up with kind of odd gaps. So I'm going to really need to pay attention to what I'm doing. So I'm just going to turn off all my snapping options and slide things over until I get my 8 units. And after thinking about it, I think I'm going to leave this jog here after Middle Street and we'll continue with our old grid. Maybe the reason this is called Middle Street is it's the middle of the 2 grids and there's this shift after you get to Middle Street, which I kind of like. So now let's start plopping Main Street. And for this, we're going to be using Find It extensively. So the way that I like to do this is to go into Find It, go underneath Buildings, expand the panel, and then we're going to toggle our building themes that we're going to be using, our packs. We're going to be using Southwest a bit and Northeast the most. And to begin with, I'm going to be using exclusively level 1 buildings. And that has everything to do with height. And I think I'll begin with some of the commercial buildings because these to me really fit the vibe of a downtown. And I'm just going to kind of go block by block and place buildings that seem to make sense. And I've been holding this building right here. This is the public market, and I really like this asset a lot. I'm going to do something special with this one. I want to unlock this one, and I want this one to level up naturally. And that's because this building gets nicer and nicer over time. And we're going to make sure that this is a place that feels like it's evolving and changing with the community. Now I want to dive into some mixed use buildings. Now in general, I want to keep the heights a little bit lower. So 4 stories, 5 stories max. And I want to make sure that we're not going 100% modern looking buildings. So I don't know that we're going to use this sort of a building at all, but we may very well go with something like this corner piece right here, which looks more modern, but still has some of those old school vibes and flair. Next, I want to dive into offices because there are a couple of offices that I think are going to work really well in both the Northeast and the Southwest packs. Now, I'm going to give a shout to B. Squagelhausen, who tipped me off to one of the assets that he made because we've got this level 1 4x6 office that looks just like an old newspaper building. And that is just the vibe that we want for this location. That is an awesome asset. And I want to add a couple more offices at this end as well, but I want these to be lower density. So I am going to enable the Southwestern pack because we have a number of lower density offices. And I'm also going to add some Southwest commercial buildings down here because in specific, I want to make sure we have a grocery store. I think I'll place that right here on the corner of Bailey and Main Streets. And then at the other end, I want to have some auto-oriented commercial type uses and some motels. And out for the rest of Main Street, I want to have some row homes. You might think that we just grow these in, but I just don't think they're going to look as good as if we plop them. So these will be some of the last buildings that we plop. I'm also likely going to clone some existing buildings and place them throughout Main Street as well. And I'm not sure if you caught what I did here, but I tried to have the focal point of density to be in this general area right here, and then taper off the heights and the densities as we got to some of our low density uses. So I did leave a couple of gaps over here though, and those were very specific as well because I want to make sure that we have our city service buildings back in here. So we're going to be adding in police, fire, a post office, and maybe even a library down to this area. And what I've done here is I grabbed the Japanese University Library, and I'm using that as our community's library. And this is right off downtown, right by our newspaper. And then down here, I've used an interesting mix of assets as well. This is the Southwestern Fire Department with our small town police station. And over here, we have our Eastern European Post Office. And I think that these all just really blend well together. And the last building I want to plop is going to be the Atkin Palmer Mansion. This is one of our new signature buildings. And I want to imagine that the person who founded the newspaper built this mansion for themselves so they have an easy walk to work. And it's right in front of this grand park. So now there's a rationale for the park and the mansion for both existing. And now I want to grow in a few buildings, specifically the blocks right behind Main Street. We're going to be using 100% Southwest buildings, but before we do that, I want to control the zoning because right now it's not doing what I want it to do. So I don't want any zoning on Middle Street or Middle Street, which is kind of funny. These are both called Middle Street. And then I want to add full zoning back to every single side street. Now, interestingly, you can see that zoning didn't completely cooperate, whereas we had a nice 8 units of separation in between the roads before. Sometimes now we have 4, sometimes we have 3. We're going to have to make do with that. We'll figure it out as we're zoning things in. But to start, I'm just going to kind of zone in one gigantic swath all the way down here with low density residential. And from a quick visual inspection, this looks okay, though I don't love this building spawning in. But I have an idea for this. I want to try an experiment. So I'm going to grab this building and pop it over here temporarily because I think I want to try to make a block of these and imagine that some developer came in with the idea of creating affordable housing. So we're going to have some narrower, smaller lots over there with these buildings. But these don't fit over here, so I will do a bit of plopping. I just basically grab other buildings in the nearby vicinity and just make it fit a bit better. I also want to narrow things up here in between Main Street and these buildings. We have an opportunity for at least another house, basically all the way up and down here. And to me, that is looking much more organized, much more natural, and much more what I'd expect to see in a downtown like this. And now that our downtown's in place, let's move on to a little bit of downtown detailing. Downtown detailing is going to come in 2 halves. We have the Main Street detailing itself, and then everything that's happening behind the buildings. I'm going to start on Main Street, and there are really 3 things that I want to do. Number 1, I want to create street cafes. Number 2, I want to recolor the pavements, the sidewalk, to make it feel like a traditional historic downtown. And then I want to add street trees and planters. So let's begin by identifying these locations where we're going to have some of our cafe seating. And I think that this looks like it could be a place with restaurants, but maybe this is completely ideal. It's got those canopies right there. So for this, I'm just going to grab the exact same road and add a node. You can see as I hover over this, I get those crosswalks. If I double click, I should add that node, and then I can upgrade this to have a wide sidewalk. And now I have a place to put the cafe seating. And now that we've identified all of these areas, it's time to start to change the pavement color. Now for this, we're gonna be using a bunch of G87's assets, and these are all absolutely fantastic, and I think that you're gonna love them. And we're gonna begin with vanilla curbs. This is going to help us fix some of this nonsense right here and just give everything a really clean appearance. So for this, I just need to find the curb and draw it in myself, and then carefully control what I'm doing so that I completely cover up the vanilla sidewalk area. had to modify things just a little bit. And if you make a mistake with these, just know that they're Netlanes. So for that, to delete these, you have to go into remove Netlanes in Better Bulldozer. Otherwise, you can't get rid of them. But the whole reason I wanted to do this first is because now I should be able to fill this in because we're going to be using a surface. So with Area Bucket, I'm going to attempt to fill in the Netlanes with maybe this clay paver F. And that wasn't perfect, but it gives me a pretty good starting place. So the Area Bucket will always be a little bit janky, but you know, this is all right. So now I'll turn it off and I'll fill in the rest of this. And now I'm able to round things out with the rest of the detailing. Things like cafe seating, some street trees, maybe even some benches and garbage cans. And now I want to add some street trees through here. And for this, I want to make sure that we're adding planter boxes first. And I've got a whole bunch of excellent tree grate decals, and I'm going to use these in the downtown area. And I want something that feels fairly traditional, so I'll probably go with something like this. And then I want to make sure that my settings are completely perfect here, because if I get the settings right, I should be able to easily place trees on top of this. So I'm going to have the separation be 20 meters, but I also want to have fixed length on. This will make it really easy for me to be able to put those trees right on top of here, like I mentioned. And I think for the tree, I'm going to go with a linden, and I just want to make sure that I get this perfectly centered on here. Because my settings haven't changed, it's really easy to plop that right there. And then lastly, I'm going to go with this fairly simple garden bench through this entire area. So wherever I place these, this is the bench that we'll use. And as I look at this, there's one more major change I'd like to make, and that is to the street lighting. This just doesn't fit well, and it's kind of randomly laid out. So I'm going to get rid of 100% of the street lighting on this one street, and we'll place our own. And I think I'm going to go with these light pole park number 4s. They feel like historic streetscape, and boy, oh boy, these are going to be amazing. And honestly, this might be my favorite block in all of Magnolia County. It feels so familiar to me and so detailed. The only thing that I don't like is that people are walking through our cafe seating, and I'm not sure how to prevent that. If you have any ideas, or if you found a way to do it, drop a note in the comments below and we'll implement it in the next one. But now that we've created our template, I'm going to do this to the entire street. My goodness, this was a lot of detailing, but I am really loving the way that this is turning out. But there are two things that we've got to change. And that's because all of our lampposts are different colors, as are all of our benches. And I don't think that would fly. Let me explain why. Generally, this kind of a place has what's called a business improvement district. And that district is basically a taxing entity that would tax all of the business owners for some of the unique amenities in this area. Now, because they're doing that, they have a greater degree of authority in this particular area over how the tax funds are spent and the general aesthetic. So there'd likely be a committee that would meet monthly to talk about the business improvement district, to allocate funds for certain things, different activities, and maybe even decide the colors for the lamps that line the streets, things of that nature. So I want to copy what we have right here. This is the color I'm going to go with, just a black street lamp. I'm going to clone this, and then I want to match the color variation, and I'm just going to paste this right onto there. So now I just have to find all the different variations that there are, and paste this on here, and then eventually all of the lights will be black. And then I've got to fix this. It's driving me crazy. I can see that this whole thing is a little bit askew. So in Move It, I've selected just props and I'm able to straighten that up. That looks a ton better. And now for the benches, it's much the same story. There was only 4 or so variations for the last one, so it shouldn't be all that difficult to find them here. So I'll copy the whole color set and try to find the variations once again. And with that, we're done detailing the front of this downtown, and my goodness, this turned out way better than I thought it was going to. I absolutely adore this. This is fantastic. This is the vibe that I couldn't capture before that I absolutely can now. So let's transform the back of these buildings as well to make them feel authentic. Now to do that, there are really 2 things I want to do. Number 1, I want to make custom parking lots in the rear of the buildings. I think that they'll fit a lot more. They'll be a little bit awkward, which I think in a lot of areas like this, the parking lots are irregular and it just makes sense that it would be like that in an area like this. And then I want to provide a significant landscape buffer in between these parking lots and these homes right here. I'd expect there to be a pretty substantial buffer. Now, I've got a couple of other tricks up my sleeve that I'm going to show you. They're going to be really exciting, but let's begin right here in this block. We'll use this as the demonstration for what we're going to do. So I'll begin by adding just the general pavement surface back here. And then I want to look at the existing surfaces and see if I need to pull any out. And you can see right here, this one has to be pulled out. Now I want to go into my parking decals and add some of these. And these should be functional so long as I draw invisible roads to them. Then I'll grab this invisible road with the pathway and attach it to both sides of this road. Then we'll use one more G87 asset, these awesome vanilla pavement decals. These allow you to basically cover over some of the sidewalks and attach your custom parking lot to the pavement. And there we go. That's not perfect, but that is pretty darn good. Now we need to also add a buffer. And for this, I basically want to steal the fence that's already here. And I'm just going to run this all the way along the side of the building. And then we'll add a significant landscape buffer. Though I do want this to feel fairly natural, so I'm going to place the trees individually. And that is more or less what I want to do for this entire area. So I'm going to go through the rest of the blocks downtown and do this exact same thing. Now, before we finish up our last block, I kind of laid a trap for myself. I always forget that the buildings don't level up to be the same building. So we had our public market right here, and rather than going from the public market to an improved version of that asset to an improved version of that asset, we got a totally different asset when it reached level 3. Or even level 2. It's interesting. We're working our way towards level 3. So I'm going to eliminate this and look for that very specific level 5 asset. And now we'll work around this. And with that, we've completed the rear of our buildings, and honestly, this looks fantastic. Every single one of these is different spacing, different configurations. We're actually using these facilities. The only thing that we're not seeing utilization of is the parking back here. Now, this is going to be used, but the problem is we've got a whole bunch of parking at the front of the buildings, and as a result, no one's using the rear just yet. But if we want to make sure that this works, the one quick test is to go ahead and remove parking from the front. So I'm just going to upgrade this momentarily. And what you can see is everyone ends up parking in different locations, including some of the locations in the rear. And the more parking that we take from the front, the more people end up parking in the back. So we know it's working. We can remove these and go right back on our merry way. Now, I know that the level of detail that we put into Main Street and the surrounding area was extreme, but I think that this might be the best Main Street that I've ever built. And bluntly, I think that this is a special place. And I always say, if you're building a special place, don't be afraid to put a little extra time into it. That's what we've done here. Now, for the rest of this, we're just going to zone things in and kind of have less detail. But that's also fine because this is going to be just a bunch of residential neighborhoods. We don't need to put that same level of detail in. Because for the rest of the community, we're just providing people a place to live. We're filling things out and making it feel much more real. So with our Main Street detailing complete, let's move on to filling in the rest of the community. Before we fill in the rest of the community, I want to point out one thing that I did off camera. Realizing that the rest of the downtown was going to suffer from the exact same problem as our public market, I've gone through the downtown and mixed up the building levels. So I've replaced some of the buildings that were level 1 with level 5 buildings, and just in general tried to give a bit more diversity. So we don't have any buildings that are the same standing side by side. So it looks a little bit more diverse now. As a result, we've got these two buildings that are the same building, different levels, and it just looks a lot better in my opinion. So let's begin with our city service buildings because there's two more that we have to place. We have to replace our elementary school and we need a new medical center. So for the medical center, I want to go with one of our Southwest medical centers. And I'll place that right here, and I'm going to place an upgrade as well. We're quite a long ways away from the rest of the county, so I think it's really important that we place this here. But we can't stop there. We've got a whole bunch of palm trees, and that's not going to work in this location. So we'll remove them with better bulldozer. And we'll replace them with lindens, which is much more appropriate for this part of the world. The old elementary school sat right here, and our new elementary school will as well. For this, I'm going to go with another Southwestern asset, the Southwestern Elementary School. Now, I will need to modify the roadway network a little bit, but I think it's completely fine. What we'll do is bring this road up right at the location where this entryway into the school is, and this will be where our turn occurs. Now I just want to see if we need to upgrade this. Indeed we do. We are completely at capacity. So I'll begin with the arts and music building. And then I just want to check our overall educational status. And it looks like in general, we're actually fairly low. So as a result, I'm going to add on one more upgrade. And I'm going to even add this annex building, and I'll add that across the street. And we'll imagine that that is the administration building for this school district. Now, another thing I want to add is a playground. This asset doesn't have any sort of outdoor play area, except for this little area back here, which in my opinion just isn't good enough. So we'll have that large playground right there, along with a basketball court, but we've got to change the colors on this. And there we go. Slight modifications, but I think that they are very important. The only thing that we're missing around here is some sort of a fence, which I think would be mandatory at an elementary school like this. So I'll steal the elementary school fence and then just go all the way around here. And the nice thing is that fence is actually a Netlane, so it was very easy to put up and it just looks very clean. I should try to use Netlane fences more than I normally do. Then the last thing we need to do for our elementary school is add a bit of parking by our administration building. So I'm going to add that right off to the side right here. And this campus should be good to go. There are two more city service buildings I want to adjust. First is going to be the high school right here. There's not a lot of utilization for this, so I will get rid of this. But even though I could go with a smaller school, I don't know that I want to. What I think I'm going to do instead is go for our Northeastern High School, and then add a sports field to it. And then I'm going to use the gravel pedestrian path that we downloaded a while back to make our connection over here. And the main reason for that is it should match this ground a little bit better. And all 26 students who go to school here absolutely love it. Now, I just want to point out, if you're wondering where I got the gravel paths from, they're from the Road Builder mod. Someone made it and uploaded it to the Road Builder store. Absolutely wonderful assets. Love using them all over the place. And then the last city service building I want to modify is actually our cemetery. And that's because when we built this city, you had to have everything attached, and now we no longer do. So I'm going to move our upgrade, and I'm going to take this thing a long ways away from the cemetery. I'm going to actually move it way over here by our elementary school. And because I have anarchy on, I can do this. And what I'll do is place this right here at the end of this road. I'm going to add a cul-de-sac bulb. And now this is just the church. So this is going to need some parking. Generally, churches require quite a bit of it. Now, the unfortunate thing about this parking is that it'll only be used a couple of days a week, but it is generally something that the churches seek, and most people don't argue with churches when they ask for parking. So I've added these 2 lots right here, and that should be good enough for the church. We're also going to say that they have a ton of the land back here as well. And though I'm not sure that any user in the world would agree to completely enclose their parking like this, I like the idea of hiding it, so that is exactly what we're doing. Now, before we zone things in, we did plop this one building here. We imagine this being affordable housing. And what I think I want to do is actually relocate this to right here near the cul-de-sac. And we'll imagine that maybe the church sold this to a user that was specifically developing affordable housing. And as a result, I'm going to add an alleyway behind this. And now I think that those uses make a bit more sense. Now for our zoning, I want to be incredibly controlled. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to use our zoning mod because we have so many things zoned around here. Actually, it's allowing me to. You can see that it's adjusting the zoning as I go through here. The first thing I want to do is focus on the park. All the zoning should front the park. And unfortunately, my zoning tool didn't work there, but not a big deal. I was able to quickly change it. Now I'll toggle the zoning on the opposite streets while also trying to avoid zoning on our collector over here. Now I am going to center some of these blocks because again, the road sizes are a little off. So we'll just slide these around. And then I wanted to point out that I added this alleyway right here. The main reason for that is that the zoning was a little bit off. But because we have some older homes right here, or older home right here, I'm going to imagine that it's completely fine that we have this alleyway here. Maybe that was part of the original design of that particular area. And that brings us to some of the older areas in the community. What I'm going to do here is upgrade all of these roads. And then I was hoping that I could just change the underlying zoning, but I completely forgot that the road size is going to be a little bit different. So as a result, I'm going to de-zone all of these and zone in a whole bunch of homes that are 1 unit apart. And now before we zone things in here, I want to choose where we're going to have our zoning. And then I think that everything else is looking more or less like I'd like it to look. I basically prioritized certain streets, and I'm trying to make sure that we're not fronting the collector unless we have to. So in this entire area, I think I'm going to go with some of our beachfront properties just to mix it up a little bit. And then the last area that we have to modify is right here over by Ithaca Street. And what I'm thinking is for this one, we're going to try to leave some of the old homes behind. But let's get the streets upgraded first. And then I'm going to add a mixture of beachfront properties and southwestern properties to this area. And by a number of them, I meant like 10 or 15. Got rid of most of them throughout this entire area. Now you might notice I'm rebuilding these homes right here. I built these lots 4 units deep, and when you build a 4 unit deep lot, you get a whole bunch of these. And I've been playing a lot of whack-a-mole, but I think that the right approach is just to either go 3 or 5 units deep when you're building in a colder climate. Otherwise, you get a whole bunch of those buildings, and it's just kind of frustrating to play all that whack-a-mole. But I think I've got them all gone. And there's one more thing that I want to do to the homes real quick, and that is change the roof colors. Now, these colors that you see right here are just not all that common in Midwest. So I'm going to grab this, find that roof color, which I think is this first one. That wasn't it, so I'll just reset this. It's actually this color. I'll make this darker, and then I want to copy this color, and I'm going to select another asset that's very similar to this one, go up to match color variation, and then paste the black roofs on all of them. And if you do it the way that I'm doing it, you only change the roof and nothing else. And in my opinion, that was a huge change that made this place feel a lot more authentically Midwestern. So with our community filled in, let's move on to a bit of landscaping and detailing. I know what you're thinking. We've already done a ton of landscaping and detailing today. How could I want to do more? Well, I feel like we have to. The river is a prime example of what we have to do. We removed all the landscaping here. It was never really activated to begin with, and it needs to be. We need to make this feel like an important part of the community. So to that end, I want to add paths, I want to add riprap, I want to add a beach. I want this to feel like a place where people visit. Speaking of trees, we also need to change out some of the trees that we have in between the neighborhoods. If you look at these, most of these trees feel rather Nordic, and I want to swap them out. I want to have trees that are local to this area, things like oaks, London planes, and maybe a young linden or two as well. Now, in addition to that, I want to go up and down each street and add street trees. And that might seem impossible considering we have these narrow roads. But what I want to imagine is that the first meter or 3 feet off from the sidewalk is public right-of-way. And if we have space like we do right here, we're going to plant trees up and down the road. That's not the only change that we're going to be making to individual lots though. I also want to remove surfaces. So you can see that right here, for instance, in the cemetery, we've got this grassy surface, and I don't want that anymore because that surface can't accumulate snow. So I'm going to replace surfaces like that one, surfaces like this one, surfaces like the ones on the homes here with some of Sully's surfaces that can accumulate snow. I also want to touch up some of our older landscaping that we've left behind. I've inadvertently deleted a few things here and there, and it's an opportunity to renew and refresh things. Maybe make this look a little bit less like I went crazy with the line tool. Maybe a chance to center parks like this one. Little things, the little things that make your build feel a lot better. And then as I see little things like this area right here, I'm going to correct them. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we have diagonal street parking. This is outside of the central business district, so I don't think we need to have that there, and I would swap this out as a part of this process as well. And we've got a lot to do, so let's get started. And with that, we have the new and improved Bailey. And I've just got to be honest with you, I've had so much fun with this build. This is one of my favorite builds ever in City Skylines 1 or 2. It's just been a lot of fun to pay attention to the details. And I want to give a shout out to one specific creator for that, and that's Canadian Moose, who I've been watching do some really interesting things, creating small, intimate downtowns. Moose always says to gather inspiration from places that you know well, not recreate them, and I tried to do that exact same thing here. I tried to draw a bit of inspiration from Wausau, Wisconsin, a place that I grew up in, the place I had my first apartment alone in, and a place that I love. And honestly, I think that this looks really, really good. And with all of that landscaping and detailing done, there's only one more thing left to do. That's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour. You know, I've got to be honest with you and say that I've been avoiding Bailey for the longest time because I was never really happy with how this area turned out. But with all the changes that we've made, this might actually now be my favorite place in the build. It just feels so Midwestern. It feels so quaint. It feels well put together. It feels like we're leveraging all of the tools at our disposal to create something that is it's just cozy. I just really love this build. And I want to thank all of you who on Discord encouraged me to go ahead and do this. I want to thank all the creators of the region packs because I couldn't have put this build together without them. It just all really comes together to create something really outstanding. And you know, I think we have a lot more work in this area. I think that there are more improvements that we can make. I think I might need to recruit some help too. So stay tuned for that. But for now, I think we've got to leave it here. And I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. There's a million things that you could have been doing. You decided to watch me micro detail a couple blocks in Bailey. And for that, I appreciate you and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.